Testing. Yeah, I see the light now. So. Okay, we'll call this meeting to order. So we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll go ahead and lead that. Roll call, please.
Kevin Henderson,
Present.
Chairperson, Luke Corona,
Here.
Stephen Blum.
Present.
Thank you. We'll have the verification of agenda posting.
The agenda was posted Friday, January 20th, 2023 at 3:58 p.m.
Okay, approval of minutes. It says none. What does that mean?
They will be brought to the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll start the public input. This is the time for anyone in the audience to speak on any item not on the agenda and within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. Speaker cards are available in the lobby and are to be completed and given to the secretary before speaking. When the secretary calls your name, please come to the podium, state your name and city for the record, and speak to the City Planning Commission. If you are joining us by Zoom, please click on the bottom of your screen to raise your hand. If you are joining us by Zoom using a cell phone, please press *9. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes with a maximum of 30 minutes per subject. Please note that state law prohibits the Planning Commission from discussing or taking action on any item not on the agenda. So do we have any speakers?
I have no speaker cards.
Okay, we'll close the public input. We'll move to public hearings. Item 1, tentative map 2021-1, conditional use permit 2021-6 for a planned unit development, site and architectural review 2021-4 extension. Can we have the staff report?
Yes, thank you. For this item, for the tentative map, CUP and site and architectural review extension, staff is requesting a continuance of this item to the February 9th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting, which is a study session meeting, but these will be public hearing items scheduled for that. There was a noticing issue for this meeting for this item. So we're recommending a continuance to February 9th, a date certain.
Okay, thank you. Can we get a motion to continue the item to a date certain of February 9th?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0. We'll continue to item number 2. Can we get the staff report?
Yes, thank you, Chairperson Henderson. This item for the conditional use permit 2022-4 had the same noticing issue as the last public hearing item. So we are also requesting a continuance to a date certain of February 9th, 2023.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes 3-0. We'll move on to item number 3, zoning ordinance amendment 2023-1.
Thank you. Tonight, we'll be looking at a modification to the zoning ordinance related to accessory dwelling units. The Planning Commission discussed the city's ADU ordinance on August 4th, 2022 during a joint study session with the City Council. And during that meeting, we discussed the necessary modifications that would need to be made to the city's existing ordinance in order to be compliant with state law. After that meeting, staff began preparing the new ordinance, and then Governor Newsom signed AB 2221 and SB 897, which further restricted how the city can regulate ADUs. And so staff had to go back and re-amend it again. And these, the Senate bill and the Assembly bill took effect on January 1st, so that's incorporated into the ordinance before you tonight. Since these two bills weren't discussed during this study session, I've provided a brief kind of overview of what it changed. It did change quite a bit. The bills modified the maximum height of attached and detached ADUs. It requires the city to reduce the front yard setback if that setback precludes the construction of one 800 square foot ADU on the property. If the city does deny an ADU, the city needs to provide a full list to the applicant of why the ADU was denied and what the applicant could do in order for the city to approve it. The city can no longer deny an application for an ADU based on a non-conforming zoning condition, a building code violation, or unpermitted structures on the site. The bills clarified some earlier bills by specifically stating that a junior accessory dwelling unit can be constructed within the garage. It requires an interior door from a JADU into the interior of the house if it shares a bathroom with the main house. And it includes a definition of what an objective standard means. It was not included before. And an objective standard is now defined as a standard that involves no personal or subjective judgment by a public official, and that is uniformly verifiable by reference to an external and uniform benchmark or criteria available and knowable by both the development applicant or proponent and the public official prior to submittal. So these new changes and clarifications are incorporated into the draft ordinance tonight. This layout follows staff's proposal with the zoning ordinance overhaul to make the zoning ordinance more user-friendly, easier to understand. And what we're recommending is that the existing 17.22.040 be repealed and replaced with the new one, with the new chapter 17.32. And this chapter will provide definitions, clear regulations for ADUs, clear regulations for JADUs, what the permit application involves and what the review procedure is. So it's fully within the zoning ordinance and easy to see. So what happened to my missing? No. For junior accessory dwelling units, the regulations within the ordinance are a junior accessory dwelling unit has to be located within the wall of an existing or proposed structure, including the garage. So it could be within the existing dwelling unit somewhere in the house if you wanted to carve out an area, or it can be located within the garage. An applicant who's requesting approval of a JADU can add up to 150 square feet in addition for ingress or egress into the unit, and that still counts as a junior accessory dwelling unit. You are only allowed one per property, and the maximum size is 500 square feet. Off-street parking is not required for a junior accessory dwelling unit, but a separate entrance is required so they can access from the outside. A junior accessory dwelling unit must include an efficiency kitchen, so they have a place to cook. And when requesting approval of a junior accessory dwelling unit, the property owner will either need to occupy the primary dwelling or the junior accessory dwelling unit. One of my slides seems to be missing, so I'll go over what the requirements are for a regular accessory dwelling unit. So for accessory dwelling units, attached or detached, you are only allowed to have one on your property. You can have one and a junior accessory dwelling unit, but you cannot have two accessory dwelling units. The maximum size for an accessory dwelling unit, as currently proposed, and we'll discuss that a little bit more, is 1,000 square feet, and that's what the government says we have to allow at a minimum. We are requiring a minimum side and rear yard setbacks are 4 feet, so 4 feet from the side and the rear. And if it's a detached accessory dwelling unit, it needs to be set back 6 feet from the primary dwelling unit to have that separation for building code. And 3 feet from any uninhabited structures. Lot coverage is the same lot coverage established by the zoning district in which the property is located, And if the accessory dwelling unit is proposed on a historic property, that needs to be so that it is not visible from the right of way. So it can be in the rear and not visible, or it needs to be entirely within the existing structure. Again, each ADU is required to have its own entrance, and fire sprinklers are only required if the existing primary dwelling unit has fire sprinklers. Some additional requirements that staff has included, which we can include into the ordinance, is to limit hardscape in the front yard, and we're recommending that it's limited to 50% of the front setback area, excluding the allowed driveway. That's to limit someone from paving over their entire front yard for parking. We are recommending a separate utility connection for new, oh, okay. Separate utility connection for ADUs, which are the result of new construction. If the ADU for some reason is visible from the public right of way, we would like the ADU to match the style, color, and materials of the primary dwelling unit. Mechanical equipment would be required to be screened from view, so any air conditioning or other equipment related to it would need to be screened by the fence or other materials. And we're recommending that short-term rentals, which are rentals under 30 days, be prohibited. For accessory dwelling units, there are two options that the Planning Commission should you choose to, can amend what staff has written, because state law does allow some modifications. One is the state requires us to we have to allow at least a 1,000 square foot ADU. We can allow up to 1,200 square feet. If you would like to do so, we can change the ordinance tonight. That would be an option available to the Planning Commission. The second is the state requires detached ADUs on single family properties to be 16 feet in height, but multifamily can be 18 feet in height. We worded the ordinance to match this, but if you chose to allow for a taller ADU, you could do so. If you just wanted to do 18 feet, so it's just consistent across the board, that's another option available to you. As part of the application and approval process, there's a deed restriction. We require one now. There will still be one. And the deed restriction is for a prohibition on non-residential uses with the exception of a home occupation. Again, letting people know that short-term rentals are not permitted. Restricting that ADU cannot be sold separate from the primary dwelling unit, and then a restriction on that maximum size of the junior accessory dwelling unit if they had one. Staff is aware that there are non-permitted ADUs in the city. There is a permit that people can get for conversion of space from non-habitable space to habitable. So for example, someone might have requested approval to convert their garage to a family room or a living room or a bedroom, whatever they may have requested. And after those approvals, they converted them to accessory dwelling units. So they put in a kitchen. When reviewing requests for ADUs, we will determine if some sort of conversion has occurred on site. If so, that number will be included within what's available on site. So if you had a garage conversion, you converted it into a junior accessory dwelling unit, now that's counted towards your junior accessory dwelling unit. And what we'd like to do is work with property owners on getting these units legalized when they come to us, and we'll work with them through the process to get convert their ADUs legalized through city channels. So in conclusion, several bills have amended the government code since this section 17.22040 accessory dwelling units was amended in 2019. These regulations restrict how cities can regulate ADUs and JADUs, and our current zoning ordinance is not consistent with state law. The new chapter 17.32 has been written so that it is consistent with state law, and staff worked with the city attorney's office to ensure that it is consistent. The layout's been designed to meet our goal of modifying the zoning ordinance so it is more user-friendly and clearly establishes the requirements for ADUs and JADUs so that homeowners and applicants can clearly see what the rules are and what the process is for approval. Should you choose, again, the planning commission can choose to allow a larger ADU or a taller detached ADU if you would like to do so. So planning commission has two options tonight. Staff is recommending option 1, but option 3 is to approve as written by staff. Option 2 would be to approve, but to make any modifications that you chose to do, including those two options I gave you. Or you can choose to continue the hearing and provide staff with some more direction if you would like to. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for staff?
Yeah, I had just one. I didn't see it in here. I might have missed it, but can somebody have a JDU and an ADU on their property?
Yes, you can have one ADU and one JADU, but you can't have two ADUs.
Okay.
In single family. Multifamily has its own restrictions.
And then as far as the height, if we decide that it needs to be either equal or lower, then that's part of your original or?
So the way staff wrote it is consistent with the government code saying this is what you have to allow. So the government code says we have to allow a 16-foot detached for single family, and we have to allow an 18-foot detached for multifamily. You can go higher. There's no limit on that one. We wrote it to match the government code, but if you felt that you wanted to allow a higher one, if you felt like, let's just do 18 across the board, it's up to you. That there's very few areas in which you can change what the government code says. For most part, this is what you have to allow. This is one of them. The size, we can go up to 1,200 square feet. There's another one.
Okay, so an ADU can be single or multifamily, and then the JADU can only be single family, correct?
Multifamily gets different regulations. So multifamily is allowed to convert existing space to a smaller ADU. It's called so they could take a boiler room if they had it and convert it to an ADU, a laundry room. Multifamily gets a different sort of kind of regulation. And then they can have detached as well.
You mentioned historic properties. Could you define how those are determined, and do we have historic properties in Hollister?
Not yet.
So the city of Hollister has two historic districts that are on the National Register. One is our downtown historic district, and one is our Monterey Street Historic District. And those have defined properties which are included within them. So this would apply to those. I would have to double check, and maybe you know off the top of your head, Erica, but I'd have to double check. We also have our Old Town medium and Old Town high density zoning districts, but I don't know off the top of my head if those districts as a whole would qualify for the historic properties that are identified in the code. It might just be the two register historic districts we have.
And this again comes out of the government code. It's to protect historic properties. So if there's a structure on the site, let's say an old barn, and they converted it, you can do that even if it's visible. What we're talking about is a new structure. We don't want you building something that then damages your historic designation.
So I had a question about you said there are properties that are not legal. Does that mean they're not legal by our current municipal code or by this new proposed municipal code?
They are not legal because they added a kitchen without a permit. So they do not have the required building permit and they do not have a required ADU permit from planning. So it's two reasons. It's they got a legal conversion. And then at the time when impact fees were very high, they put in a kitchen without a permit.
Okay, and when you say you'll work with them, just meaning you'll just provide them advice and
Yeah,
you'll,
we'd like these to become legalized because we can count them towards our numbers as well. And now that the fees are much lower, the reason why they did it before is mostly gone. So as always, staff is always willing to work with anyone. So if someone comes in, they don't need to be scared. We'll help them out. We'll help them along their path to get approval of an ADU.
And there have been a few that we've helped through the process already that we're already undergoing too. So a few that had done conversions and then came through and now they have full legal ADUs that both they and the city can count.
And that doesn't change from today, what we're doing today. It's still the same reason. This zoning ordinance update doesn't change that. There's illegal under the current code, but we want to make everyone aware that we know that they're out there and we're willing to help them get through the process.
okay, and how are you gonna let everyone know? Is it some kind of public outreach campaign or?
I'd like, as we get into our housing element, which is a little off topic, but I'd like to open up the discussion of several policies related to ADUs and programs to help both convert these types of units to countable ADU units or JADU units, as well as possibly some programs about if people want to deed restrict to affordable rates, perhaps the city and the council is willing to do some kind of incentive. So there's a lot of ideas floating around our heads in the planning department and the housing division. As we get into that housing element process, those are some of the programs that we can talk about to help generate housing, which is the state's goal, and also we've seen a lot of success in our ADU program in the last just couple of years. I think we've had almost 30 each year get approved by the planning department. So they have a lot of success. One thing we're working on too is the city wants to go out for RFP to design ADUs so that it helps lower the cost because they can select an already architectural drawing. So there's a lot of things that we're trying to do to help people get ADUs and help them legalize ADUs that they might have.
And I think we're trying to update the city's website. It's a good place where we can put an informational handout there for anyone that's kind of looking at the website, looking at what an ADU is, to kind of let them know.
Right. Any more questions?
So the help that you're offering people with illegal ADUs, what does that look like?
So so we're going to try to work with them. Obviously the permit that the information that we would normally require, we're probably not going to need it. Maybe photographs. It's going to depend on a case-by-case basis. So it's really hard for me to tell you what we're going to do without seeing what they've done. I mean, there could be ADUs where they built the entire thing without a building permit or anything. And then that's an entirely separate process. But it's kind of our way of letting everyone know that we know that there are some out there. It's twofold. One is if you actually have one and you're trying to get another ADU and a JADU, that one that you have now, even though it's not permitted, is going to prevent you from doing it. The other thing we want to let people know is that we're always willing to work with individuals and we're here to assist them in trying to get that ADU through the process so they can have an approval and a building permit so that it's actually a legal space.
Okay, I think we're done with questions and we can move to the public comment at 6:27. any speakers?
I have no speaker cards. Let me just check online. And I have no hands raised.
Okay, close the public comment at 6:27.
I have a simple question. Can the ADU be two-story or not?
Oh, sorry, I'll just open the public hearing again. You can come here and you can come ask the question. Thank you. So people can hear you.
So I was listening to the discussion, and whether it's 16 or 18 feet, is that usable space? Or is that simply the ridge height of whatever the ADU is? So can it be a two-story unit? Is my only question.
Okay, thank you for that question. Could staff, could you answer his question?
So that's the maximum height. It's to the maximum ridge point. That's for a detached accessory dwelling unit. So it is supposed to be a 1-story. You can add on to your house. And then it's 2 stories, but it's attached. It's a different rule. You get the same height as the house. That makes sense.
All right, thank you. Any more speakers?
I have no other speakers.
Okay. Okay, we'll close the public comment at 6:28. So what's the pleasure of the commission? I guess we have a couple items to talk about. The one was the whether we would want to stay with the 1,000 square foot limit that it's in the state's rule, or we have the option to go up to 1,200 square feet. And then also the question about the 16 to 18, whether we stick with the 16-foot height limit or go to 18. So what are the thoughts?
I think as it sits with the state, I'm not too sure I want to go much larger than 1,000 square feet, but I think the height is a key to matching just for aesthetics, visibility, how it looks from the street. But like the gentleman brought up, 2-story house attached will be the same height. I don't know, do we really want to go and change it to 18, or should we stick with the state to not have any trouble later on down?
As far as the 18-foot mark goes, I mean, the state's allowing for 18 feet, correct?
The state says we have to allow a 16-foot and an 18-foot, and then that's it. That's what we have to allow at a minimum. And then you can choose whatever you want after that. The only place where the state gives us that range is the size. It's a 1,000 to 1,200. So they're specific on that one. We can allow up to 1,200 if we wanted to do so. We're not required to. State says we have to do 1,000. You could decide what you would like on the size, and the same for the height. If you wanted higher, you could go higher on a detached. That's up to you, but those are closer to a side and a rear property line, so you're closer to your neighbors.
So you said that's a minimum, 18 feet isn't, or 16 feet's a minimum.
No, 16 feet is the minimum. The government code says we have to allow a 16-foot detached ADU.
Okay,
It doesn't cap the height though, unlike the size. So you could, if you wanted to go up to whatever it is you wanted to go up to, there's no limit. The reason for the lower limits though, is that with a 4-foot side and rear yard setback, you are close to your neighbor. And so if it starts getting really tall and you're close to their neighbors, that's a consideration you might want to, think about.
We were just going to add that, so everyone is aware, including the commission and the public, we haven't seen a lot of ADUs on the size over 750 square feet, because that's where proportional impact fees start to come into place. So from a size perspective, and just what we've seen in the past year or two, most of them are coming in less than 750, if that affects your consideration on allowing a larger size ADU as well.
what's typical cost for impact fees?
So for if your ADU or JADU, well, JADUs are always less than 750, but if your ADU is less than 750 square feet, the impact fees are zero. The only fee that would come into play is if you hire a new construction detached ADU, you would pay the water meter connection fee, which is about $450 to provide a new water meter. And staff is recommending that we keep that in the ordinance for those ADUs that it is applicable to. Because part of the reason that we want separate utility connection is so that the people who are living in these ADUs separately from the existing structures can meter their own utilities and make sure that they're only being charged by their landlord for the utilities that they're spending. But there are some cases in the law that we cannot require that. But so if you're less than 750, you're just paying 450 for a meter if that's applicable to you. And then above 750, you pay a proportional impact fee. So if, say, you were building a 1,000 square foot ADU and your existing house was 2,000 square feet, you would pay 50% of the single family impact fee, which right now is probably about $30,000 because I believe the single family impact fee is a little over $60,000.
When considering this a square footage of an ADU, does the square footage of the property that's not already occupied by the primary structure, is that come into play? For example, if someone has a pretty tiny backyard and they just want to use all of it, kind of understand my question?
So the lot coverage is limited to whatever the lot coverage is in the zoning district that you're in. So whatever that lot coverage is, you have to follow it. Except we have to allow an 800 square foot ADU. So then that lot coverage gets waived proportionally to allow the 800 square foot ADU.
Yeah, I mean, based on that, I mean, someone could have a pretty small lot and throw a maximum 1,000 square foot ADU on it. So that would, that's, it could get kind of ugly if we're gonna let them go to, or recommend going to 1,200. Right.
The state requirement.
Yeah. Okay, that I'm leaning that way as well. Any further discussion? Can we, anyone can we get a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 1. So adopt a resolution recommending city council approve of amendments of the zoning ordinance to repeal section 17.22.040 accessory dwelling units and replace with a new chapter 17.32 accessory dwelling units.
Okay, thank you for that motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Let's have a roll call vote.
Commissioner Luke Corona,
Yes.
Commissioner Stephen Blum,
Yes.
Chairperson Kevin Henderson.
Yes,
Motion carries unanimously.
thank you. We'll move to item 4. Staff report.
This is our second zoning ordinance amendment of the night, and this is related to density bonuses. Density bonuses and state law surrounding density bonuses was also discussed at that August 4th joint study session. During that, we discussed what does the state require of us? In what ways is our ordinance non-compliant? Many bills have been passed since our existing ordinance was adopted in 2008, so it's very not compliant with the government code right now. Because density bonuses are something the planning commission doesn't deal with very often, and one of our commissioners was not at that joint study session because he was not on the commission. I'm going to give an overview of what a density bonus is. And so a density bonus allows the developer to seek a bonus in exchange for donating land, building a child care facility, or for building affordable housing. The density increase that they are allowed is an increase in the maximum number of units that is permitted in the general plan. So they get to go whatever that zoning density ranges in the general plan, they get to go above that. It does not require a zoning ordinance amendment or a general plan amendment. They get to have it as part of the density bonus. In addition to the density bonus, the city is also required to provide one or more incentives or concessions, and that's based again on what they are providing. So this chart is kind of a summary of what the density bonus, the minimum density bonus is. And what it is it's based on the income category of the affordable units. So very low, low, and moderate. Moderate does have to be for sale. It cannot be for rent. And so they have to, the minimum percentage. So for example, very low, 5% of all the units within that development have to be dedicated for very low. If they are, then they qualify for the bonus. This is in addition to any affordable unit that the city requires. So this is an extra, something they'd be providing, an extra that they'd be providing. And then with those minimum targets, for example, they get one incentive and it goes up to 4. So for an example, if I have 100 unit residential development, and that's the maximum that the general plan allows, and I take 10 units and I dedicate it to low, which is 10% of the site, they get a 20% density bonus. So then they get to construct 120 dwelling units. So it's 20 over what would normally be allowed. They are not required to take advantage of the increase in density. They can just take advantage of an incentive or concession if they chose to do so. So similar to ADU, we would like to repeal Article 2, which is not consistent at all with state law, and now replace with a new chapter. So it's on its own now. And it would be chapter 17.3 for density bonus. And again, this is laid out so that people can clearly find what they're looking for. So we'll have the purpose, definitions that are strictly related to density bonuses, eligibility, what the allowed density bonus is. You can get a density bonus for affordable housing on the site of a commercial development. That's new. What your allowed incentives or concessions are, parking requirements, bonuses for childcare facilities, location and type of units, what your application entails, what you need to submit to us, how we are going to review that density bonus application. We also go into what comprises the housing agreement, and that's an agreement between the city and the developer to ensure that those units remain affordable. A deed restriction will also be required. And then we go into how are we going to make sure that the units remain affordable and with the control of resale. So for affordable housing on commercial land, an applicant can receive a density bonus by partnering with the housing developer to construct residential dwellings in addition to a commercial development. To take advantage of this one, they have to at least give us the units, 15% of the residential units have to be dedicated to very low income households, and 30% have to be dedicated to low income households. A incentive or concession is a relief that is granted to the developer, and the number that they get is based on the percentage of affordable units that they have on the site. And so one of the incentives is a reduction in the standards required by the zoning ordinance. And that would include parking, which is already in the code, but parking, lot size, setbacks, lot coverage, a design standard if they chose to select that. And when a developer selects this option, lot size, if they were, let's say, for example, requesting a lot coverage and a setback reduction, that doesn't count as two. All the relief from the zoning ordinance counts as, all of the relief from those development standards counts as one incentive. So they could request all of those. Another one is approval of mixed use for a site where it is not otherwise allowed. Other regulatory incentives, such as maybe they want the street width more narrow than the city typically allows, perhaps they don't want to have sidewalks. And then another request that they can request is a direct financial contribution. And if they selected to do that, that would have to be approved by the city council. And under the state density bonus law, we are not required to approve a request for financial contributions for their project. For a childcare facility, you can get an additional incentive if you, as part of your development within the project site, provide a childcare facility. The requested incentive is to be related to the construction, so the size of or operation of the facility. And staff is including a note in there that would need to be accompanied by an application for a site and architectural review or a conditional use permit, so that we can ensure that, one, the facility will be constructed, and two, that it would meet those requirements where we are giving them an incentive related to the size or the operation for the construction. We are recommending a deed restriction. This will be similar to ADUs, where we have a prohibition on non-residential uses in the affordable units, with the exception of home occupations, a prohibition on short-term rentals, so under 30 days for the affordable units, a description of the affordability requirements. So within that deed restriction, it would say this unit is restricted to people in the very low income category or low, whatever affordability category it falls within. And then also the number of years that that unit is subject to affordability. So if I have an affordable unit and I'm trying to sell my house, the deed restriction pops up and the buyer and everyone is aware that that is an income restricted unit, and it is restricted for that set number of years or when that number of years expires. Pursuant to the government code and included in the ordinance, low and very low income units have to remain affordable for 55 years. The government code does not specify how long moderate income units have to remain affordable. Staff is recommending that that be 30 years. It is at the city's discretion. What we have been doing in the recent past is 30-year affordability requirement. And so putting 30 in this ordinance would just be consistent with other projects we've been approving and how we've been doing moderate restrictive income units in the past. And then again, there's provisions in the ordinance related to the resale of the units to ensure that they remain affordable for the period that's prescribed. Currently, there is no application fee for density bonus applications. We're not sure why. It's most likely because staff has only had one in recent years. We know that there are more coming in. I have one that's going to apply in the next couple weeks. And there are some others. And staff does spend time on these density bonus applications because the law is so complicated. And even with this zoning ordinance, there are some ways in which we still have to review the application. Is what they're requesting consistent with the law and the ordinance? Housing agreement has to be prepared. Staff does spend a considerable amount of time. The city attorney usually gets involved due to the nature of these requests. And so staff has been spending time on this without charging a fee. And so we are recommending an application fee of $5,227 which is the same fee as a conditional use permit. We probably do spend more time on these density bonus requests than a conditional use permit, but this is the fee that staff identified as a good fee for the interim. So there have been a significant number of changes in state law since the current density bonus ordinance was adopted. Staff prepared this with the assistance of the city attorney's office because this is such a very complicated section of the government code and there are a lot of laws and restrictions. The city attorney helped us write this ordinance. The chapter is laid out again, the same with ADU, to meet our goal of modifying the zoning ordinance to clearly establish the requirements, lay out the process so it's easy for everyone to understand. And staff is recommending that the planning commission recommend an application fee to the city council to cover the costs associated with processing these applications. Again, you have three options before you tonight. One is to adopt a resolution as staff recommending the city council approve the ordinance as it has been laid out in your resolution, or make modifications and then adopt a resolution with those modifications, or continue the hearing and direct staff to provide additional information or clarification. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
All right, any questions for staff? I had a question about the childcare facility.
Mhm.
So a developer is gonna build a set of homes and then include somewhere within that plan a childcare facility.
Mhm.
So who runs the facility? Does somebody buy into that and start their own business? I'm just not clear on how that works.
So for the childcare facility, and the government code has specifications within the government code related to children, income levels. It gets tied back to the other affordability of the units. But the applicant, if they wanted to run a childcare facility, they could do so. They could partner with someone that wants to run the childcare facility. There are in many affordable projects, there are childcare businesses that they partner with these projects and run centers within housing developments. So it's really up to the developer to kind of select and partner with a person. It's to encourage childcare development and then for us to assist them in the construction and operation of that to make it affordable. So your bonus is tied to that.
Okay, so who ends up owning the childcare facility? Does the developer maintain ownership, or is it sold to?
They can, that's up to them. I believe
Okay.
Jennifer can answer that one.
Yeah, the law doesn't specify, so it really, it like Erica said, it's up to them. And it can just depend on what arrangement they make. The only thing that the law requires is that the facility actually be built and operated for a certain number of years. So they can't just design it into their project and then, build it and then it becomes something else. It has to be dedicated to that purpose and then actually opened and ran.
Okay, and so if it's not run for a certain amount of years, is there some penalty in place?
There's not a specific penalty in place. And to be honest, I can't think of how it would be enforced. So, and that's one of the reasons why staff has written into the ordinance a requirement that the childcare facility and that a site and architectural review application be submitted I don't know if it's at the same time as the density bonus application or shortly thereafter, just to ensure that the developer truly intends to actually build that facility.
Okay. I don't think we have any more questions. We'll open the public comment at 6:52. Any speakers?
I do have a speaker card, but I will state for the record that we received via email, and I believe the commissioners received as well, a written communication on this item from Alex Siwak, and that's been made available to you as well tonight. And then for speakers, I also have Alex Siwak.
Thank you. Just to answer Mr. Henderson, I think with the childcare, it needs to be clear that you only have to proceed with the childcare, as I understand it, if you are wanting to get incentives or concessions for the childcare facility in your overall density bonus. So if you don't use the childcare facility as a lever for getting more out of the density bonus, then you can do whatever you want, I believe. So that's so we've gone through we're going through a density bonus proposal now. And I believe the 10 hours of attorney time and 10 hours of staff time is related to us. The big point is, what's a development standard and what is a concession and incentive? And when do you need a incentive concession to make it a bigger development standard? And as far as I understand, it's if the degree of change in the development standard is such that it goes against the California Building Code or the Fire Code. There's different places in the density bonus law where these things are sort of touched on, but that's my overall understanding of it. We've touched on the childcare facility. And a problem with that is that if you insist on having a architectural review and conditional use permit and so on, before you even know if the density bonus is going to be approved, you're potentially spending thousands and thousands of design time and attorney time, and you don't even know if the density bonus is going to be approved. So I think that should be a separate thing later, rather than at the beginning when you're asking for your density bonus. A second part of that is that the legislature foresaw this and over the years made it crystal clear that you don't need any discretionary other approval for aspects of the density bonus law provisions. And that's very clear in subdivision F. As far as a fee is concerned, there should not be any fee. Can I continue or?
Yeah, please add 2 minutes.
So with the fee, the density bonus law itself is very straightforward. You have a formula and this is what it is. And so the only interpretation is when the planners want to try to reconcile whatever the design, building, FAR, whatever you want to call it, heights and everything else and setbacks with what are development standards that can be waived. That's where the rub is. But in terms of what the formulas are, there's a table. You just go by that. I would advise putting in a provision in the ordinance that says to incorporate changes that happen in the density bonus law, that those are automatically become part of the city's ordinance. And in the last, I think, 10 years, 11 years, the density bonus law has been amended 35 times. So whatever you decide today, probably in the next year or two, it's going to be different. And it would be a good idea to have that provision that if that occurs, the governing parameters, constraints are whatever the density bonus law is as it evolves. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more speakers?
No more speaker cards. Give me one sec, although I think we just have staff online. No one online.
Okay, we'll close the public comment at 6:57. What is the pleasure of what is any discussion? What would you like to discuss at this point? So I'm finding this a pretty complex topic and a lot to take in. I personally feel like I could use more time to kind of digest everything about this. So I mean, I'd be leaning towards option 3, but it looks like we would need to ask for some clarification. But on the other side, option 1, I mean, we're just making a recommendation to city council, so they would actually be the ones putting it in place and, you know, correct. Yeah. Yeah, I think we would have to ask for something. I don't have something off the top of my head, but
And if you want to continue just for more time to digest, you can do that as well. You don't have to provide direction, ask for additional information or clarification. It's at your discretion.
So to the speaker's question, every time the law is amended, are we gonna have to review this?
So no, so currently the ordinance that's in place doesn't comply with state law, so state law will prevail. And the same is true here. So even if this is adopted and state law changes, state law is going to always prevail. The purpose of actually putting it into the city ordinance is just to provide kind of an easier way for applicants to understand what they need to do to apply for a density bonus or what it requires. So, you know, it's unfortunate that these laws are changing so quickly. But at the end of the day, it's the state law that needs to be followed. And this is really just kind of supposed to assist applicants.
Is it possible to add to one of the resolutions, just be compliant with state law?
I mean, it is automatically even without a resolution, so.
So
But that would be an option.
prevails, yeah. I'm comfortable with 1 as well. But I mean, if you need continuance, then
well, given what Jennifer said, and the intent of the ordinance, and I know that a lot of work has already been put into the ordinance and the text. So based on the intent to make it more easier for an applicant to understand what they need to do, that makes sense to me. So I think I would be comfortable with 1 as well.
with state law being what it is, I think it's good for us to get on board.
With the fees that are in place, if an applicant submits, pays the fees, and the applicant is denied, and they go back and they amend whatever needs to be amended, do they have to pay the fees again? Reapply,
So
basically?
a denial is a denial under density bonus law has a very strict way in which you can deny. If it complies with the density bonus law, you have to approve it. If for some reason they didn't comply with one of the requirements, for example, maybe they didn't have that minimum percentage or they're asking for more incentives than they're allowed to have, we're not going to bring them up for denial without working with them first. And that's all done under their application fee. So that's part of what staff does is we're reviewing your application. Does it meet what these requirements are in density bonus? If it doesn't, I'm going to tell you why you don't and how you can fix it. And then hopefully we can get you to a point where we can recommend approval, because we'd rather recommend approval than denial. If it gets denied, then there's a whole different process they have to follow for this type of application, because density bonuses are different under the government code.
Okay, any other discussion? What is the pleasure of the commission?
I'm comfortable with number one, and if you guys are too, I'll be ready to make a motion.
Yeah, that would be great if you would like to make a motion.
Okay. So I'd like to make a motion that we adopt a resolution recommending city council approval of amendments to the zoning ordinance to repeal Article 2, density bonus of Charter 17.04, residential zoning districts, and replace with a new chapter, Chapter 17.34, density bonus, with the new Chapter 17.34, and a recommendation to the city council to adopt an application fee related to the density bonus applications.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Luke Corona,
Yes.
Commissioner Stephen Blum,
Yes.
Chairperson Kevin Henderson.
Yes,
The motion carries unanimously.
thank you. Sorry, I had to find my agenda page. So we'll move on to new business,
I have no new business.
move on to old business.
I have no old business.
Thank you. Planning Department reports.
We do.
Go ahead.
City of Hollister hired a new Development Services Director. So we're pleased to introduce you to Christine Hopper, who started this last Monday. Like to say hi. We're very excited to have her. She's amazing.
Thank you very much. Hi, Chair and Commissioners. Very excited to be here. So this is my fourth day here at the City of Hollister. I most recently came from the City of Marina, and before that, the City of Monterey. So I'm very familiar with the whole peninsula and love getting up here where it's a little bit warmer. I live in Prunedale, so it's super easy for me to get here, and I'm just really excited to be part of the team. I spent this week getting to know the staff, and there's a lot of them. So I've been at a lot of meetings, just getting to know everybody, and off to a very good start. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed the ease of how you all are running meetings. That's very, very wonderful. And a lot of jurisdictions can take a lot of lot of guidance from you all. So excited to get to know you all, and there's a lot of work to do over the next year, probably 2 years. And the planning staff is working very, very hard, as you've noticed on the zoning ordinance, especially in light of general plan and all of the other developments that are going on. So excited to be of service to you all, and I'm available to chat. I'd like to at some point meet individually with you all just to kind of get your take on what's going on and some background with all of you. So
Right, welcome.
I believe that concludes our report.
Okay, planning commission reports. Any of you have anything that you'd like to report? Okay. Then the last thing is adjournment. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.